Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Strategic Insights from a CISO, Career Insights and Strategic Decisions. I am Reenal Vikiria, and I'll be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. Now about our speaker, Helen Rabe. Helen is a seasoned cybersecurity leader known for being a strong advocate for aligning security with business objectives. She emphasizes a forward-thinking perspective, ensuring security strategies support both current business operations and future business goals. A versatile security leader who clearly communicates complex strategies across all levels of the organization, including the board. Helen has successfully delivered programs that fostered high adoption of security behaviors across organizations. Helen has successfully developed, implemented, and refined ISMS strategies. She has led high-performing teams in implementing strategic risk mitigation, threat management, and the delivery of world-class security and data privacy solutions across varied industry sectors, including financial services, life sciences, and most recently, broadcasting and media. So without any further delay, I would now hand over the session to you, Helen.
Hello and good morning and good evening, good afternoon to wherever you are. Thank you very much to the EC Council for this opportunity. I'm really grateful to be here. So I know that you were given literature on LinkedIn, and I've seen a number of you actually stalking me on my LinkedIn profile. Thank you for that. With regards to the insights, and insights implies deep level outcomes. I'll be honest. I'm going to caveat and open with this deck with, first of all, a remedial slide, or what I've been told is a remedial slide, but it's very necessary. The insights I offer you and everything that follows from this deck and within this deck is very personal. This is a subjective deck. All right, this is my journey, this is my strategic insights, and this is the recipe, or if you will, the prescription that works for me. And you'll see this theme track throughout the deck when it comes to formulas, prescriptions, and the like. I'm going to start out with a confident assumption that everybody on this call is familiar with strategy. You know how to deliver strategy, define, refine, you name it, you have familiarity with strategy. That being said, this slide and why perspective matters is because strategy for me has always been about cutting the same cake different ways to communicate my strategy to different audiences. And in order for me to do that, over the years, I've learned I had to keep it really simple. So it's the old KISS statement, you keep it simple, and this is it. This is nothing original in this slide, and I don't mean to condescend to anyone. It shows you the foundation of how I apply my strategy, whether it's my career strategy, whether it's a strategic strategy for my enterprise. This is how I strategize. And the reason this formula works for me is because the CISO life is noisy. It never stops, right? If I've got too much noise in my strategy and how I need to communicate it, I'm going to get lost in that noise. So this is how I start. And the way the slides are designed for you is they are quite loud. And then by that, I mean there's a lot of verbiage on these slides. It's a lot of words. The slides are designed by me for takeaways. When I've done webinars in the past, people have come to me and said to me afterwards, Helen, how did you do this? Or what did you say there? So whilst I'm tracking through the deck, by all means, screen grab, take things down. These are my insights that are there, and I hope they offer value to all of you with regards to where we're tracking on this journey. Just, have a look. Nothing in this slide is, as I said, overly original, but it is all down to how I do this, and it's my journey. So the why, the need, the how, and the what, those are the questions I ask myself whenever I start any strategy. And we're going to track straight off into the CISO career journey. And as I said to you earlier, subjective. This is my journey. How I do this is what's worked for me. So the insights I offer you here, I hope will be insights that you can leverage, you can take inspiration from, but I will always be clear that whatever you do, you need to do to fit with who you are as the person. That's the authenticity of any journey, right? It's down to you to make this work. And I start out saying, your challenge area should never be ignored in this regard. And what do I mean by challenge? Some people call it weakness, whatever label you wish to attribute to this. When you're going on this career journey, and I speak from bitter experience on this, focus on your strengths, right? You can't ignore your challenge areas. They're real, you're human, they're going to exist. Embrace them. They're not a weakness. I don't see my challenge areas as a weakness. There's just not my strengths. And in that how piece, in my formula on the strategy that I showed you on the previous slide, and also, by the way, I speak with my hands, so to any of you who are irritated by that, I apologize in advance. The how, if you stick with your challenge areas as the dominant aspect of how you're doing your how, you're going to take a long time to get through your career, right? And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm at the age where time is not on my side. So focus on your strengths. And I've used an example here of lack of technical depth to build team and building teams. I started on my CISO journey 10 years ago, and it wasn't an easy journey to start. Breaking into security was not straightforward for me. Back in the noughties, the entry barriers were pretty intense. And back then, if you didn't have deep technical expertise, you weren't allowed into the fold. There was just no way to break in. It was very, very challenging. I say no way, it was challenging, all right? My career path before that, business analysis, project management, program management, service delivery management. I have the full IT systems lifecycle, and I specialized in delivering that in IT networks. Security back then, traditional perimeter-based security. It was a smaller world. It was a less noisy world, but there was still complexity. But I only ever touched on that as part of my project deliverables, so I didn't have that deep tech experience. So when I wanted to move into this this industry in earnest, and that was around 2008, 2009, I realized that if I focused on roles where the deep tech was going to be required, I was never going to get anywhere. So I had to figure out how to break in. And I became a fixer. So back then, if anybody had been compromised, whether financial services or the like, back in those days, nobody needed you to know. It was a deep secret, a dark secret. It was a deep sense of shame associated with being compromised back in the late noughties, early tweens. So what I would do is I would go in behind the scenes and I would fix compromises. I would do the program management, project management, work with third parties and remediate off the back of incidents. And that established me a baseline, but it played to my strengths, all right? Because I knew that the challenge areas were still far too big for me to break into any leadership role at that point. And that helped me, that established the opportunity for me to then, when I took on a job at Costa Coffee back in 2013, I think it was, I did the remediation program, and then I designed the risk report, the conclusion report and recommendations, and I handed it to the managing director and did my presentation. And he said to me, well, you've recommended a head of information security. Can you do this? I went, yes. Because even though I hadn't had the subject matter expertise, I had the principles, I had the knowledge, and I had the skills to be able to do that. And I was very confident in that, right? Those were my strength areas, and I played to them. Stick with your challenge areas, you'll take too long. That's a lesson in that one. On a career journey, how long does it take? The how, that is down to you. And I'm going to give you, I work in 5-year macros. So I'll give you an example. I started at the age of 40 to 45, and I'm oversharing here, but age, it happens to all of us, and it's very natural. So 40 to 45, right? The objective was, I started as a head of InfoSec. By the age of 45, my objective was to be a CISO. That was the objective. The goals, the bit between, that's not so prescriptive. And that's where you're going to have to be proactive and figure out what it is that is going to take you from the head of InfoSec to the CISO. The same thing from 45 to 50. I wanted a role that was strategically a greenfield. I wanted to be a CISO, but I wanted to be a CISO where I could define a strategy, build that from nothing into something. And back then, that was with Abcam. I started as a 1.5 on the CMMI, and then by the time I left, it was a 3.2. So I had the opportunity to build that. And then the next macro was 50 to 55 was I wanted to be a CISO in a halo brand, a heavy hitter global brand that was recognized, right? Each of those objectives was clear to me. What wasn't clear, and never is, are the goals and how to get there. And I can tell you that those goals are really down to you and how you network. And I can never underestimate how much networking accounts for this, because that helps you to define the opportunities along the way, right? Part of that as well, I've put here, is focusing on your skills development, networking, all that sort of thing, absolutely. But also I've mentioned here starting an exit strategy, 12 months, whatever your tenure is. And I tend to work in 3-year slots. I like to be in roles no less than 3 years, because 3 years is where I managed to actually execute the deliverable. When you're talking about an exit strategy, I'm not talking about an aggressive exit strategy. I'm talking about passive, right? You need to know where your career path is going to go, right? You know what your long-term future state is. That 12 months gives you the opportunity to start passively putting out into your network. This is what I'm looking for. I'm interested in this kind of role. But it also gives you the ability to start interviewing to build muscle memory. And the reason why that's important, and I'll use my BBC as role as an example, in that last sort of 45 to 50, I'd been at ABCAM for 3 years. I hadn't interviewed, I wasn't interested. I knew where I wanted to be. But when I was approached, and I was approached by the BBC and very flattered by that, I didn't think I'd get the job. I thought, this is way outside of my league. But you know what? I'm going to apply anyway and go for it because I need the experience of what it takes to interview at that level. Right? So as you're evolving, as you're maturing in your career path, always push that boundary on your exit strategy with regards to interviews and make sure that your exit strategy accommodates the ability for you to be able to have that opportunity. It matters. Right? And now we move into the CISO skill set. These are my fundamentals, right? So when I'm doing mentoring, and I do a lot of mentoring for people, and my mentees are various age ranges, from young 20-year-old Gen Zs to millennials to even some Gen Xs. These are the fundamentals that I espouse to my mentees, right? Soft skills. You are a leader as a CISO. And I know that's stating the obvious, but what that means is you need high degrees of emotional intelligence. You need to be able to read the room. You need to be able to communicate with various stratospheres of an organizational structure, from the C-suite to your own internal peers to your junior level team members. Your soft skills are absolutely critical in how you manage your communication, how you manage your leadership, and they're critical in how you bring on board people to support you with that vision of a strategy. So never underestimate the soft skills. You've got your principles, you've got your CISMs, your CISPs, you've got all your knowledge, but what they don't teach you is the soft skills. And your soft skills are important, especially as a CISO. When you're communicating strategy to a board member, the way in which you communicate that and the way you learn to read a room and the way you learn to read body language is critical to knowing whether or not what you're saying is actively being listened to and whether it's been absorbed and supported. And the same goes for your junior members. Then there's the technical and technological skills. I alluded to this earlier. I do not come from a deep tech background, but that doesn't mean I'm not technically savvy, right? You have to be. And I've had to learn how to leverage through my teams to support me with that. So the soft skills means that I have a safe space with vulnerability, and I know how to communicate that without coming across as weak, but still maintaining respect. And then I have strong technical teams who support my challenge areas where those technical skills are not as strong as people believe they should be when it comes to this. It also depends on the type of CISO you choose to be. And I choose personally not to be a deep tech CISO. I'll talk to archetypes further in this deck later. But there is an element of choice here around the type of CISO you choose to be, and we do come in types. Right? Policy and geopolitical knowledge. You need situational awareness as a CISO. You have to understand the big picture, the wider world ramifications of what's going on out there. The World Economic Forum on an annual basis releases its risk review report, of which there's a cyber specialist report associated with that. Every year, I recommend you read that. Alongside that, take your regional reports. Here in the UK, we have the NCSC's annual report. I tend to take both the WEF report and the NCSC annual report. I do a threat review of that, and I produce a presentation to the board, the C-suite, and also my internal peers across the business. Every January or February, once those reports are produced, I produce a summary outline of the global threat landscape and what it means to the organization. This creates awareness. It also creates buy-in and engagement, right? And it helps the business understand the wider threat landscape that you are already aware of. It gives them visibility. It pulls them into your world. It pulls them into your conversations with a measure of awareness. So it's a really powerful tool. Situational awareness is key. You cannot be ignorant to what's going on in the wider landscape. Emerging tech. We know in our industry that school is never out. We're always learning. I heard, the opening salvo, your CPE points and the like. We never stop learning. And right now, AI is everywhere. You have to keep abreast of emerging technologies. I mean, for example, I'm doing prompt engineering courses to understand how to become more proficient in utilizing the tools. It also gives me insight into how these tools work. so that when my organization and my teams, they come to me and they go, Helen, we want to implement Otter AI. I go, okay, I know what Otter AI does. Why do you need it? We check in with the business case, and then we go, we already have an in-house solution that's an enterprise license level for this. You need to be able to have those conversations with a sense of knowledge on the usability of these technologies. So, the emerging technologies, you're never going to stop learning. And I think I preach to the converted on this, because as we all know, our industry is always changing. Personal resilience. I pulled this out separate to the first one on soft skills, because this is a stressful job. I mean, I'll be honest, I think that any role in security is stressful. Our industry and our chosen career path is very stressful when it comes to security, but CISO jobs are known to be stressful, and they are. You're 24/7, 365. There's no off switch. When you're in the thick of it during an incident, you are being pulled on in every direction, and you consistently need to maintain a sense of grace and control, or perceived control. All right, you absolutely need personal resilience. Otherwise, this job could chew you up and spit you out. And the personal resilience part of it that I advocate as well is you need a grounding in your own life. So for me, I am a sci-fi fantasy geek. I have been a Marvel and DC fan since the 70s. I read comic books all the time. That's my escape. That's my grounding. I do a bit of exercise, not as much as I'd like, and I garden. Vegetable garden, I'm very bad at. But those are the grounding elements that support the personal resilience. If you live to work, you will burn yourself out. And CISO burnout is a very real thing. So the personal resilience is key to the success of this job. And adaptability. And by this, and I mean it's contextual, adaptability here is you need to move beyond the learned principles. So you've got your knowledge, you've got your CISMs, you've got your CISPs, you've got the principles, and they're hugely valuable. Never underestimate them. But then you have real life, and you have to deliver in an organization that is not a textbook, and it is carnage. There's no structure in the way in which things come to you. There's governance by all means, but everybody has different needs, right? And you will be faced with things that you're asked to take accountability for. That if you track back to your learning and your knowledge, you'll go, well, this is first line, this is second line, that doesn't belong with me. These are not conversations that go down well if you turn around and go, yeah, that doesn't belong to me. And it may very well not belong to you, but it's that old adage of, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? And you will need to, at times, adapt and compromise and own things that are traditionally outside of your remit. GDPR was a great example a few years back. I say quite a few years back now, where a lot of security functions were required to develop the GDPR programs. And it was like, that's because there was a lack of maturity. The compromise at the time was fine. We'll build the program, we'll build the baseline, but at the point of operationalizing this, there has to be a handover into this function. That was the compromise with the business. We'll set up the foundation, but we can't operate the foundation. So adaptability is key. You know your knowledge, you know what you've learned, but every so often you'll have to lean into a situation that makes you uncomfortable, and it's key. It doesn't matter that it doesn't belong to you. Be part of the solution because it consistently engages with people in security again and allows you to then communicate out why you shouldn't own it. It's that old risk conversation. The risk doesn't belong to security, it belongs to the business. So often when you're owning things, it doesn't mean you own it in operation, but you can own supporting the baseline and the solutioning of it and bringing it to life. We're going to move into the CISO role today. Would that I could give you a clear, this is what it is. It just doesn't exist. I'm not going to go into the obvious about the modern threat landscape. It's there. We all know what it involves and how it's characterized. But I'll go into a very personal element of this on the CISO role. When I started this 10 years ago, I would say the dominant priority for a CISO requirement then was 80% technical, 20% governance risk, what have you. Right? That was 10 years ago. It has evolved very quickly and moved beyond that. If I look at job descriptions these days, I see the dominant ask for strategic leadership and risk management with a lot of regulatory insight required of it. The technical is still there, but it's almost implied, but it's not as deeply, they don't ask for such a deep tech. And when I say deep tech, I mean somebody who's going to be down at the grassroots doing the architecture, etc. What they're looking for is a more technologically savvy individual, somebody who can hold their ground, and discuss that, but somebody who is definitely focusing on managing risk, handling the resilience programs, all these sorts of things. So the role is becoming very delineated, but a big, big change here is around what the organization requires of that CISO. What type of CISO does an organization need and want? And that determines whether or not the CISO role that you're applying for, or the CISO role that they're asking for, is of a certain archetype. And we'll go into archetypes shortly. The example that I cite here is one very close to home, and when I, again, very personal. 10 years ago, when I started this in earnest as a leader, when we started looking at security and awareness training, it was the knowledge-based training. Most of you will have been through this, the tick box, the compliance-based, flat-based knowledge. And it was boring, and it was tedious, and it did not change behaviors. I mean, how many of us have been there? We do all the security training, we put in the programs, but we do not see much of a difference and much of a change. And that was the focus 10 years ago. And even back then, when I would talk and advocate for a more human-centric approach, it wasn't validated, quite the opposite, right? Now, the conversation is very different. We have a very human-centric approach to security. I never, ever liked the conversation around weakest link. It never sat well with me. Now we talk about active participants in our security ecosystem, and it does sound like a lot of words. It means that our employees are part of the conversation. And what we train them on and how we create awareness means that we influence and change those behaviors. That is proving successful. So all of these changes are evolving alongside the role, but the CISO is also helping to evolve that. Right? The type of CISO is helping to evolve that. I talked about CISO archetypes. This is not a specific science, right? You can go onto Google, you can type in CISO archetypes. There's a whole bunch of us. These three are very close to my heart. It's very self-serving, but we come in all different shapes and sizes. And we network amongst each other. We often leverage off each other because some of us are deep tech and in the architecture, and I will often lean into many of my peers who are very strong on the technology side and say, look, I'm building this kind of castle in the sky, and they'll give me guidance. What solutions can I look at? How should I be modeling it? Those sorts of things. But the same is in reverse. They'll come to me and go, Helen, look, I'm looking to define this strategy. This is where I'm hoping to go. What do you recommend? So we do have a lot of bartering going on with our own knowledge and our own experience in our community, but that is because none of us are the same. So we talk about the technologist, the strategist, the transformational leader. That's where it also gets tricky. I consider myself to be a blend, a hybrid of the strategist and the transformational leader. If I was asked to say, if somebody said to me, what kind of CISO are you? That's where I would fit if I was going to put myself into a box or attribute labels to myself. Those are my strengths. There are people who obviously do the technologist and the strategist. Be honest, they're rare. The good ones are rare. But we also don't come in specific archetypes. We come in blends and hybrids. Deloitte a few years ago did something called the four faces of the CISO, so you can look into that as well. But the CISO adapts to the cultural dynamics. The role that is required by the organization will determine the type of CISO that we're looking for here. And we're going to now move into the corporate strategy inside. So that part was the career journey. That part is the me. And when we come to the Q&A, I hope that some of you challenge me more on the nature of the career journey and the more detailed stuff. But again, if you just follow those slides, those just give you highlights into the nature of how, as a CISO, how to adapt your career, how to build your career from a strategy standpoint, as in what is the career path that you're going to take if you want to become a CISO or a leader. Now we're going to move into the more enterprise corporate-based strategy insights. My opening slide told you that we were talking about formulas and prescriptions. These five, this is my prescription for strategy. So when I'm having to align the business and the security pieces together, irrespective of the organizations I've worked in, whether it was life sciences, commercial real estate, or broadcasting, these are the five, if you will, activities. These are the five fundamentals that I use when I'm aligning my business and my security strategies and priorities, right? So understanding the enterprise strategy. If you have the luxury of a corporate strategic function within your organization, be a part of it, to the point where even if you matrix into the head of corporate strategy, be a part of it. One of the challenges we have in security is we often talk about being consulted at the back end. We're always retrospectively retrofitting things. If you align with your corporate strategic function, if you're embedded in that, you are part of the conversation from the outset. You have the visibility from the beginning. It is hugely valuable. You have insights into their roadmaps. They have insights into yours. You have the conversations around those, look, you're delivering this, but you're introducing risk, cyber risk, for example, but risk, right? And more key to that is you're mapping the dependencies in those conversations. So as you're privy to those roadmaps and you're seeing what's going on with product and development, and you go, oh, okay, you're going to be there in 2 years. Yeah, you have to be ready to secure those environments in 2 years. You can't be notified of that 12 months into the rollout. You need to be ready to go 2 years in advance, possibly even longer, if you can get the insights. You need to be ahead of your business, because what you're doing is future-proofing the defenses for the strategies that are coming your way. By the time the business goes into operation, you need to be ready to secure what they're putting in line. So don't be late to the party. And it's very, very difficult if you don't have corporate strategy, but it means that you need to be as embedded in your business lines as much as possible. You have to be meeting with the leaders. You have to be asking for their roadmaps, transformation teams. And it's not straightforward because there's no singular strategic roadmap. It's multiple roadmaps that you're having to get, be a part of and have conversations with. And they're always evolving, which also means that your security strategy has to be flexible. If you build a rigid strategy, and this is why we never recommend customization, if you're going to build strategies, they need to flex. They need to be able to adapt with the growth of the business and the pivots that the business goes through from time to time. Prioritizing security initiatives, so defining security outcomes in business terms. It goes back to that, you need to be ready when the business is ready to go. Actually, you need to be ready before the business. You need to minimize that operationalization, that operational disruption. If the business is going live with something and you've suddenly decided, and I've seen this, not so much anymore, but I've seen this historically, where the pen tests have been done and you're just like, these are awful. If you go live with that, the risk exposure is huge. You're seen as the blocker. You're the problem. So getting ahead of that game, being able to focus on minimizing those disruptions is key to the success also of how security is received and how it's engaged when it comes to strategic discussions. Tying your security initiatives to strategic goals. These are a lot of words, but I found it's never binary. A strategic goal can be this, and you need to show the value of security. It's sometimes difficult to tie it back to, oh, we're going to be delivering a digitally enabled user experience for the audience. And you go, I don't know what that means practically. You have to then look at what that means practically for the business and say, okay, from a security standpoint, this is what you're trying to deliver. And I get it, a password and username is a frictionless way to go. It's straightforward, it's easy. But this is the risk you're introducing. If you use SSO, right, and it is available, here's the value. And you're building trust. You don't talk in terms of technical when you're just finding the value with your business. You talk in terms of the business. You're gaining trust with your audience members. They need comfort when they're engaging. It may be less, maybe a little bit more friction, but it's secure, and it gives the trust. So mapping those values back to a business goal is not straightforward. It's very challenging. And also communicating it in non-technical terms is also challenging, but you have to do it, right? The communication on this is key to the success of how you're aligning the business and how receptive they are to bringing on board the security teams into their roadmaps. And then the establishment of governance and metrics. Governance, not a problem. Have joined up governance. And by that, I mean, I'll give you an example here at the BBC. My Security Risk Governance Board has representation from across the business, whether it's BBC Studios, whether it's the BBC Secretariat, or whether it's people from the journalistic element, the BBC News side. They are represented on the governance board. They have visibility, because that means that they can see the risks being carried by the business, being introduced by the business. and they have a say in that. They have to be aware all the time and make sure that you are represented on theirs. Doesn't matter if it's HR, doesn't matter if it's finance. Get yourself that combined joint governance. You need the language, you need the visibility, you need the insights. Otherwise, you will miss things that are absolutely critical. And I talk lastly about, in this one, on monitoring and reporting, building metrics that evidence the value. This is a dark art for me. I see people in our industry who do metrics like it's so easy, and I'm so envious of them. My experience with metrics has been the metric needs to align with the audience requirement. The metrics that are required by my audit risk committee and my board are not the metrics that are required by my CTO, nor by the technical teams that I'm facing into. So the metrics that I've provided at times, and I've had peers look at them and they've gone, it's an odd one. It's a bit remedial and basic, isn't it? Well, yes, because my board isn't interested in seeing patch and vulnerability management stats, but my board is definitely interested in understanding how much residual cyber risk is carried by the business, and not just the business. What part of the business is carrying the dominant risk, the overhead? So metrics to me, very tailored, very audience specific. If you go and you just go, here's the standard metrics, portfolio that we apply in security, you can spend a lot of time doing that, but unless your audience, and it matters to your audience, you're going to be spending a lot of time and energy doing monitoring and reporting for very little value other than your own. So aligning business and security, understand your business and embed yourself, deeply embed yourself. Communication, speak their language. Understand what their needs are, speak their language, and make sure that they're engaging with you, like for like. Because I assure you, the best thing that happens out of that is that you are not going to be this retrospective planning where somebody goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, we forgot you existed. That can happen. It's up to you to take the lead in this conversation and really bring them to the table. They don't bring you to the table. It's very rare. So as a CISO, you are a PR campaign manager. You're out there bringing them to the table. Ethos versus culture. This conversation has got me into some hot water with my peers. It's a very, very heated and contentious conversation that I've had with some of them. Ethos and culture are often conflated for me. So when somebody says to me, how are you building a security culture? I'll be honest, I've never been able to build a security culture because culture is not monolithic. Right? The organization does not have a single culture. It has these microcultures, subcultures, countercultures. You will have people who say security is your job. I'll do the tick box, but I'm not interested. It's your problem. Right? Those are your detractors. But there are all these cultural dynamics that you need to accommodate when you think about your security and awareness programs. First of all, training without creating awareness, I've not seen that be successful. And of course, every organization has different maturities, different budgets, different employee sizes. So it has to be tailored for your organization. These are what worked for me. Irrespective of the size of the organization, this is what has worked for me, these 5 elements. But the key things that you can take from this are create awareness before you train. I spent 8 months at AbCamp with an awareness campaign, right? We did a sort of evaluation on looking at the demographics in the organization and realized 2/3 of the organization were under the age of 40. That meant that you needed to take into account a generational aspect. You needed to tailor for generational differences. Then there's the neurodivergence. Neurodivergent people do not respond well to flat-based, knowledge-based training, but they do respond well to escape rooms and things like that, right? You can't be all things to all people, but you will need to tailor to meet the majority of that diversity in your workforce. 8 months we spent creating awareness. We used an animated platform, right? Cartoons that would tell you, this is what ransomware is. This is what business email compromises are. This is how phishing emails work. This is how your personal home Wi-Fi can be compromised. All the concepts that we take for granted because this is our day in, day out lives. We speak this language. We live this. Our staff do not. We spent 8 months just creating and raising awareness. And we ensured as well that that program then could be leveraged through the personal life. And this was during COVID. So we had licenses that could be used at home as well. And I was fortunate enough to have people send me pictures with their kids on their laps, looking at cartoons, teaching them about security. Awareness. Once the awareness campaign was gone, we started the training, because that helped people contextualize the why of what we were teaching them. And that is key, absolutely key. The other thing that you need to do is you need to build a program that has both, I call it utility and usability. The program needs to be fun to engage with. Tick box things, they don't work. We've seen that. And there are so many brilliant, progressive solutions out there now that focus on human behaviors and the like, and the engagement. It has to have usability. And then utility. Where's the value in this for me? And that personal hook, I have never seen that found. That really engages people, because if you tell stories and they've had an experience, they engage with them. Right? And it doesn't need to be a training. At the BBC, for example, we utilize our employees who've been victims of scams, victims of fraud, and we have, I call them short videos on our channel, where we will talk through the real life impacts of what it means to experience fraud. When somebody steals your identity, when somebody pretends that they're here to buy something and suddenly you find your credit card details are gone through some scam. These personal stories are a hook, and they're constant. Your program isn't a one-off, you're going to train on this day and it's done, tick box move. It's constant. It needs to keep going. But I will say from this, because I know we're running out of time, do not conflate ethos and culture, and understand the complexities of culture. There is no monolithic culture. You're going to have to tailor your program, and your program is going to have to meet the needs of many, many different people. I'm going to move into the last but not least, the takeaways. These are just the overall, ensure your strategy can be communicated. That's the perspectives. Various audiences like to receive it differently. Same cake, different ways. The career is your journey. Remember your strengths, play to them. If you play to your challenges, remember how much longer it will take you. Know your archetype. It is important. If you want to apply for jobs that are so far outside your wheelhouse that you're going to struggle to deliver the job and be successful at it, that is again your choice. But I'd say that understanding your archetypes means that you're able to understand what kind of roles will fit you better. Strategy, security, priorities, and business goals are not mutually exclusive. Great words. Basically, know your business. And not only know it, live it, eat it, breathe it, and embed yourself in it. You absolutely, as the CISO, have to understand what they're doing, when they're doing, and how they're doing it. And then the culture and awareness, we've just been through it. For me, the most important things on those, the tailoring of it and raising awareness, is the usability and the utility. So, well, everybody, that's enough from me, enough talking. I'm going to hand back to my EC hosts, and they can take over, and hopefully I can answer the questions and the like that are coming at me next. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Helen, for delivering such an insightful and informative session. We found the webinar very engaging and hope it was valuable for you as well. Before we begin with the Q&A, I would like to inform all the attendees that the session is in sync with EC Council Certified Chief Information Security Officer Program. Certified CISO certification is an executive level program that teaches information security concepts from a management and leadership perspective. It covers all the components required to succeed in a C-level cybersecurity position, including audit management, governance, information controls, human capital management, strategic program development, and financial expertise. There are over 6,000 CISO job vacancies, and an experienced certified CISO professional in US can earn between $200,000 to $260,000 per annum. If you're interested in learning more, please participate in the poll being conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you soon. So meanwhile, Helen, should we proceed with the question and answers?
Yes, by all means.
Our first question for you is security model. Do you advise to use outsourced managed services at least for SOC?
Oh, okay. This is very, depends on your organization. It depends on your budget. It depends on the maturity of your organization. If you've got a well-established SOC in an organization where you should retain agency and authority over your operations, because of the nature of what you do, I would not, I mean, this is personal, right? Every organization has very different needs in this regard. So I'm not going to say one over the other. It just depends on how are you going to scale if your business is growing exponentially and you're budget constrained. Do you outsource? Do you augment? It depends on the needs of your organization. And when it comes to outsourcing SOCs, some people would prefer it because they don't want to have an internal resource pool, which is highly risky because of attrition. So they choose to outsource. No one size fits all on this, and I can't give you a definitive answer, even a personal one, because honestly, it would have to be taken in the context of the organization and its needs and its risk profile. That's what I can offer on that one.
Thank you for answering that question, Helen. Our next question for you is, what is that one unique quality you feel you have and you were able to demonstrate by creating value, which deep tech CISOs may not be having in your opinion?
Okay, that's a lot of things in one question. So what's the unique quality I think I bring to the table that, look, what do I think I bring to the table as a CISO in this regard? I think my communication skills, more than anything, the fact that I can be able to speak to the board and the chairman of the board at the BBC in one measure, and straight away go and speak to my internal teams in the next, something completely different on the same topic, and have the ability for everybody to engage with me and come with me and say, okay, Helen needs this, we're going to do this, whether they're the NED, the board, or my team. That ability to communicate to people and bring them on board with what I'm trying to achieve so that they can all get behind it. I don't know if that answered the whole question. Was there something else in there?
I'll read out it once again. What is that one unique quality you feel you have and you were able to demonstrate by creating value, which deep tech CISOs may not be having in your opinion?
So yeah, the deep tech CISOs. So I would say that it's definitely that, right? It is that communication skill. It's that ability to be a public relations manager. It's the ability to be a politician and a diplomat. All these things that I can do when I communicate to the various audiences that I require to help me deliver my strategy. And I don't say that deep techs don't have them. They do have those skills, but they are more rare, as in the ability to do the deep tech and that same level of communication. I know of 3 CISOs who do that exceptionally well, but they are rare. Next
Thank you for
question.
answering that. Our next question for you is, as a technical qualified and not certified, can there be a way into CISO world?
Repeat that for me, please. As
a technical qualified and not certified, can there be a way into CISO world?
I don't see why not. I mean, look, I don't have technical qualifications. I've got a CISM and a CISMP. I have an MBA. Right? Anything is possible, but you have to be the one who's finding the opportunities and bringing them to the fore. So I'd say, yes, it is possible. It's not easy. Possible and easy are not the same thing. It is possible, but it's not easy. I would say, if I was going to give you counsel, you get something like the CISM, the CISO. Get your certifications, get your baseline knowledge. That matters, particularly when you're entry level. People are looking for these. You won't get through the door anymore with the CV AI filters and what have you without having these things. Plus, they give you brilliant grounding, right? You need the principles, you need that baseline of knowledge. But then once you're in, you build on that with experience. So have something. As I said, I just had the CISM and the CISMP. But you need to have something, and then it's the experience on top of that that counts.
Thank you for answering that, Helen. Our next question for you is, What is your advice for professionals in the emerging economy like Africa, where many organizations could not pay enough for the CISO role?
Oh, okay, that's interesting because I don't think the UK pays that well either. But look, every country is going to pay different levels of salary, and it's commensurate with economies, it's commensurate with culture, it's commensurate with the value of the role as it's perceived in that region. But it's also the economy of that region and how it matters. The US, for example, pays very, very highly for its CISOs, depending on the level of the CISO. I don't know the African market so well, but I would say that if you're in Africa, I know of some successful, really good CISOs in South Africa and North Africa. So it's a difficult one to answer because I don't know the regional constraints. I would say that keep your studies, get your experience, and if you can find a role that offers you an international opportunity, then leverage through that. You don't have to stay in Africa. The world is a big place these days. And if you have the skill sets and you have the drive, I mean, Philemon Zongo, who is one of our heavy hitters in our industry, he's from Zimbabwe. He's been a huge success. So keep pushing forward, keep doing the studies, keep gaining the experience, and find the opportunity. I know I make these things sound simple. They're anything but I would say that you keep looking for the roles that probably offer you the opportunity to move internationally if they have the global reach. Next question.
Thank you for answering that. Our next question, how do we calculate the ROI of security investment?
I hate this question. It's such a good question, but it's one I can't answer. Everybody does it differently. I don't do ROI at the BBC. I've never done ROI in any of the roles that I've done. Some organizations will insist on it and some will not. So I'm sorry to disappoint you whoever asked such a great question, but I can't give you the answer. There are so many blogs, so many books, so many advocates out there who can tell you this much better than I can. But I can tell you as a CISO that I have never had to do that in my job. It's never been asked of me. And it really comes down to the industry and the company as to how you do that and whether or not they want it. Because not all companies see the value in ROI. They see the value in security differently, depending on the organization.
Thank you for answering that. Next question for
Well,
you
it's not a
is,
great answer, but you're welcome.
we are receiving a lot of questions, Helen. So we'll move to our next one. What are the key in presenting to board and organization? Why should CISO be required in the business?
Repeat that one for me. What is the
Key in presenting to board and organization? Why should CISO be required in the business?
Okay, that seems like two different questions. So what is the key to presenting at the board? What's key to presenting at the board is understanding your board, first and foremost. Your board is made up of a number of individuals. They are people in their own right. So if you're going to present to a board, there is a process. The process is, first of all, you understand your board. Who are these people? On what other boards are they representative? And then if you can get that, understand, and I'll give you an example. One of my board members is previously from the board of Santander. I know the CISO at Santander Bank. I contacted him and said, how does this person like to receive information? What kind of style do they like? Get to know how these people, how these board members like information presented and articulated. That's key. So understand how they like the information presented and articulated. The next is what matters to them. And that changes quarterly, by the way. There'll be a theme, but what matters to them? And also make yourself accessible as well, because if you build a relationship with a board, you will find that sometimes they'll come to you for things completely outside of the standard board meetings. An example of that, and I always use examples because I find stories are easier for people to grasp. The British Library was compromised a couple of years ago, I think it was now. And one of my board members reached out and said, Helen, we have massive archives that are very similar to this. What's the chances this could happen to us? So I then did an exercise with one of my team members and the head of archives, and we sat down with the board member and showed them what had happened in the British Library and how it couldn't happen with us, right? So build those relationships. And how you present to the board is around relationships. You need to establish that. Also, never underestimate the power of the secretaries, the PAs and the EAs in helping you understand how board members like messages, right? They're very powerful. And then that second question, can you just repeat it? So why does the organization need a CISO?
Required in the business.
Why is a CISO required in the business?
Yes.
Okay, an interesting question. Some companies don't need CISOs. That's why they operate with heads of. But if you are a major corporation, if you are a big company, and you are of a certain, if you have data that belongs to millions of people, or you're processing data, or you're processing assets, if you're anything that requires critical national infrastructure alignment, you will need a CISO, because that person is representing security for that organization at all levels, and that includes regulators. So when the National Audit Office comes knocking at the BBC's door and says, we're assessing this, this, and this, the CISO is the one who says, here's the strategy, here are the outcomes, this is what we're focused on. That measure of communication is done at the strategic level with the CISO. So not all organizations require a CISO, but if you do, the CISO is the person who communicates all of that to all people and makes sure that they are the singular when it comes to it, the individual who holds accountability. You are the shield for all your teams as well. Without that, it doesn't unify security, depending on the size of your organization. A bit woolly, but that's how I see it.
Thank you for answering that, Helen. Our next question for you is, we will be taking last two questions for today. And our second last question is, what are the top two questions asked by hiring panel while recruiting a CISO?
That depends on the organization. Again, what are the top two questions? I would say, based on my experience, is they ask you about the time that you had to deal with a major incident. How did you deal with that? How did you approach? What were the outcomes? What were the challenges? So there's a lot of focus on that. And another focus is around, have you built resilience programs? How do you determine a resilience program? And it's, how do you build that? What is considered a successful resilience program? And if you were coming into our organization, where would you focus when you look at building a resilience program? So things around resilience, risk, and incident management is often the way that the questions will go. There will be questions around security and awareness and how you deliver that into an organization, and how successful have you been. So I'd say that's the spread of questions that I've had.
Thank you for answering that, Helen. And last question for today is, can the CISO be replaced by the AI?
Everybody, I think, is replaceable at some measure, but not now. Not now, right? You will always need a human to act as a triage. There will always need to be a human element. And do I see it happening someday? Who knows? I am not a soothsayer. I don't know what the future holds, but I can certainly tell you that, the CISO role being replaced by AI now, no. In 10 years, who knows? Let's see how the tech evolves.
Thank you for answering that question, Helen, and for delivering such a wonderful presentation and the knowledge shared with our global audience. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are definitely looking for more and more sessions with you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So before we conclude the webinar, would you like to give a small message to our audience?
I would say this. There is a lot of kudos given to CISOs, and it is a tough job. It can be a very demanding mistress if you choose to become a CISO. So don't come into this role under any illusions, right? It's, if you define yourself by the role, it'll chew you up and spit you out. It is a job. It's just a job like any other. It is not beyond the realms of anybody's capabilities to do it, but it is not for everybody. You know, I talked about those skills, the soft skills, the personal resilience, all those things. They are part of the equation. Just having something like a CISO is great, but you need to be built to accommodate what comes with this, and it can be demanding. So if you're going to come in and want to be a CISO, eyes wide open, folks. That's all I have to offer on that one.
Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.